Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, we're going to have an important update on highway and bridge construction, what's going on with that in the state of Pennsylvania. But first, is there anything more important than protecting our kids? The state's Auditor General, Eugene DePasquale, is going to talk about that and a bunch of other subjects, and we'll get to that in a moment.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, Eugene DePasquale, he's the Pennsylvania Auditor General. He's sitting across from me, and we're going to talk about a number of important audits that he and the folks in the Auditor General's office have been conducting. I'll tell you, Mr. Auditor General, is there anything more important that you can think of than protecting our kids?
No, and after the Parkland shooting, the governor and I led a school safety task force. We went all over the state, put together a plan, and some of that actually the legislature began to implement. But we also do in individual school districts. My team and I audit the school safety plans of every single school district. And the recent one now that we're working on in Cumberland Valley, where there have been some horrific allegations of racism and bullying going on among students there. So that part of our audit, look, we check into the financials and the academic performance, but these type of allegations are concerning and unacceptable.
Well, how common, I mean, bullying, it seems to me, I mean, I remember back in my days, and I'm sure you do, bullying was fairly common, and it wasn't, it was like no one paid attention to it, and now it's moved center stage, properly so, right? And
not only properly so, but I think what's changed the dynamic on this is that, you know, for all the wrong reasons, but when we were younger, people would do the physical confrontation, and sort of that sort of had the shelf life that didn't last very long. Today, with cyberbullying, this stuff can go on and on and on, and harassing students online, young people online, whether it be Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and so it's taken on a whole new life of its own.
And that's very. I've always argued that's very personal.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's not like somebody's dropping a leaflet off somewhere, accusing somebody or posting something on a tree, on a pole or something.
Yeah, something in the bathroom. Which again, not saying that was okay when we were younger, but you could sort of ignore that. Today, when it's put on somebody's Facebook page, it just never goes away, and the young people deal with that. And there's a lot of mental health counseling that results from this, and even some young people have tragically taken their lives over this.
So tell me, where are you with this audit? So the Cumberland Valley audit.
So we're meeting with parents, we're meeting with students, and we're auditing the school district itself. One of the things we do, again, we don't investigate the specific allegation.
Right.
But our job is to make sure that the school has a school safety plan in place, that we make sure that they have an anti-bullying program in place, and that when they get the allegations that they're following through thoroughly to make sure that the kids get the protection they need. Yeah. And if they're not, and again we're making our assessment on that, we then hold the school accountable.
All right, 499 school districts, if I remember this correctly, in our state. And all of them are supposed to have an anti-bullying policy. Is that right?
That's correct.
Is that in state law, or is that?
It's by policy. It's by policy. It is not from a statute, but is by policy, by regulation.
Now, you got to the Cumberland Valley because there was a complaint?
Many complaints.
Oh,
yes.
Many complaints.
Yeah, it was more than it was. Again, if we get one complaint, we're going to take it seriously. But this was more than an isolated complaint.
Now, is this? Are you getting them from other school districts, from individuals? Now, I mean, now that you're doing this audit, it's getting out there. The fact that you're doing it is getting pretty well known, right?
That is correct. So sometimes when this type of thing happens and we announce we're doing it, we then start to hear from other parents and other students in other districts, and that is starting to happen. But this was the most extreme allegations we had seen in my almost 7 years as Auditor General.
Wow. All right, I want to run to a break, but when we come back, I want to get into the audit that you're doing with volunteer fire companies and how important that is, and we'll get to that.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
All right, I'm chatting with Pennsylvania Auditor General Eugene DePasquale. We're talking about a number of important audits that he and his department have been involved in. And I'll tell you, volunteer fire companies, I mean, let's face it, hundreds, if not thousands of volunteer fire companies exist. I don't actually know how many throughout our state. They're very important to the health and safety of our communities. Do I got that right?
Absolutely. Almost 3/4 of the land of Pennsylvania, not the population, but the land of Pennsylvania, is protected from volunteer fire companies. And most people are not aware of that. And we even had some municipalities, take Harrisburg for one, where there's volunteer fire working along with paid professional. I mean, so you have some fire companies that are actually a joint effort.
Yeah. All right, so let's get to the issue. They get money from the state. There are restrictions placed on that money from the state, and the audit that you did showed what?
That's right. So first of all, I'm releasing $60 million in money that goes to volunteer fire companies. It's mostly for training and infrastructure. I believe the legislature should loosen up the restrictions so it can be spent on also like fire trucks and other items like that, because buying a new fire truck is hugely expensive. I mean, these things are hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions, depending on the size of it. And I think that the restrictions should be loosened so that you don't have to increase taxes. This money is there. It's able to be used. And there's another item that needs to be changed. And that is, you take like Harrisburg or York, for example, where you have volunteers serving with paid professional. The volunteer fire money is allowed for the volunteers, but not the paid professionals, even if they're serving on the same mission. That needs to change.
Yeah, that doesn't make a lot of sense.
It doesn't make any sense at all.
Now, is the question that the change hasn't taken place because of lethargy, because there's not been an intensity? You were in the State House. You know that most things needed intensity to get through, and someone has to care about it, particularly in the leadership. So what's going on with it?
Yeah, this is not a situation where there's ideological opposition or any of that type of thing. I think it's more along the lines of, I'm going to be pushing this issue to make sure that this type of restriction gets changed. The Harrisburg fire chief is on board with this. A lot of the other paid professional chiefs are on board, and it's just up to us to try.
So it's not an issue within the fire community itself, right?
That's correct, yes.
So we're not going to have that.
No.
All right, before I let you go, there's one other issue I want to talk about, and that has to do with, you do these audits of state and local government, and occasionally you run into situations where there's money missing, there's equipment missing, and it looks like you found that, or you're auditing the Harrisburg School District for allegations. I want to be careful about this. Allegations.
That's right. The allegations is that you got a couple $1 million missing, and also thousands of computers missing. That's one of the reasons why we are in that district right now auditing it, and we're obviously going to be as thorough as humanly possible, and then let the public know what we find.
So how common is this? Not just for Harrisburg, but for
these allegations are pretty extreme compared to what we find in other districts.
Okay. So what you're saying is occasionally you might have an instance or two, but not a full plate of them.
That's correct.
You're arguing that
Scranton, Penn Hills would be the two other ones that we saw something that was in this type of extreme situation.
All right. Before, again, I said I was going to let you go, but I'm not just quite yet. All right, give me the word. Any other audits potentially down the line that you could at least mention without getting into the details?
Well, yeah, we have a climate change report coming out looking at the economic, the impact to taxpayers from climate change. That's going to be coming out soon.
And the economic impact, I take it that you're going to find that there's a serious economic impact from the
severe storms have an impact on public infrastructure,
or the lack of rain in September.
That's right. Yes, absolutely. Yes.
All right. Thanks for coming on. All right. Coming up, it's a very important update on Roads and Bridge update. You can't travel. Can you travel a mile or two in the state and not see some kind of construction?
Not many.
But I'll tell you what, it's important, and we're going to get into the details of it with Bob Latham, and we'll get to that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, representing the faculty and coaches who are devoted to providing quality public higher education for Pennsylvania's college students.
Well, we sort of joked in the last segment with the Auditor General about you can't travel a mile or two without running into road and bridge construction, but this is an important issue in the state, and there's some cause to be concerned about the reduction and where road and bridge repairs and construction is going to go. Joining me to talk about this is an expert that we bring in from time to time. His name is Bob Latham. He's the Executive Vice President of the Associated Pennsylvania Constructors. Bob, thanks
to be with you.
Well, thanks for coming on.
You bet.
All right, here we are. Summer is over. We're heading into fall. I think we're heading into fall. It's been pretty hot and not much rain, but now it's a little cooler as we tape this program.
Right.
So give us a general overview of where does bridge and road construction stand in the state of Pennsylvania as you and I speak now?
Okay, so it's been 6 years since we passed a major funding bill, and we've accomplished a lot in that 6 years. We've cut our inventory of bad bridges in half, so we're no longer have the worst bridges in the country. So we've made a lot of progress with that. We've used innovative programs like public-private partnerships to knock off some 600 in one contract, and we've done a lot on bridges. We've also rehabilitated a lot of local roads, done some safety projects, a lot of resurfacing, et cetera. So things have really been accomplished as a result of Act 89. That always leads to a but. What we are seeing now, and this will be a running theme as we talk today, is that revenues going into the Pennsylvania Motor License Fund, which are primarily paid for by fees that drivers pay, whether they're commercial drivers or private passenger vehicles pay, are decreasing. In fact, the state has issued an advanced estimate that says we're going to be down about $75 million a year. So for the first time since we increased fees on vehicles to pay for much needed highway and bridge repair, we are going to see a decrease in that, and that's basically because of fuel efficiency in vehicles. So because we have a consumption-based tax and an energy policy that is alternative to consuming fossil fuels.
Well, let me ask you this question. Given your expertise, this is a tough question. How much more do we need to do that would meet even the minimal requirements that? Now, I know the bridges, and you and I have talked about this before, structurally deficient doesn't mean they're going to fall down.
That's correct.
But it doesn't mean that it's not a serious problem.
Well, they need to be addressed, certainly. So to get to your question, in 2013, we identified an annual funding gap of $3.5 billion. Act 89 of 2013, the transportation funding bill, got to about $2.3 billion. So we had a $1 billion funding gap, which we thought was going to be filled by a federal transportation bill. It's important to know that Congress funds a National Highway Trust Fund. Pennsylvania gets a portion of that.
So we get two big funding sources from our own law, raising our gasoline tax, and the federal government.
Right, exactly. So the federal government has not acted in that 6-year period of time. So as a result, the state transportation funding bill focused on more local and regional projects, and we were hoping that for our interstates, that would be back and filled by federal funding that never came.
Is there a but there?
As a result, if you drive around on Pennsylvania's 1,900 miles of interstate highway, which is huge and significant, some of them are in disrepair. So on top of the anticipated drop in revenues, the Department of Transportation has said, well, now we have to triage our interstates, so we're taking some of the money off of those local projects and moving it onto the interstate highways. So they're kind of taking money out of one pocket and putting it in the other and trying to hold the thing together. So
there is this issue of the diversion of money that was supposed to go for roads and bridges. It's now going some other place, and that's a serious.
That's a serious issue. That's a secondary drain, if you will. That goes to the general fund into the budget of the state police. The state police obviously need to be funded, but right now we have one of the highest gas taxes in the country, an equivalent of about 51 cents a gallon in Pennsylvania, and 12 cents of that is not going to roads and bridges. It's going somewhere else. So while we have a general fund surplus that we passed this year of $300 million, and our roads are falling apart, we're taking $700 million out of fixing roads and putting it into the rainy day fund, which I would submit is maybe not great policy. I would think that we could probably use some of that money to repair our roads.
Well, in the information that you released, you say that this diversion of money amounts to more than 12 cents per gallon, which is about 20%, little more than 20% of the revenue that gets generated from the gasoline tax.
Yeah, exactly. So the gas tax that you and I pay when we fill up at the pump, about 20% of that's not even going into highway repair.
I'll tell you, when I travel a good bit around the state and I see you just get on some of these roads and you shake your heads and say, what's going on here? Something needs to be done, right?
Yeah, you've seen a lot, we've seen a lot of progress locally. We've seen a lot of good paving projects, safety interchanges and things like that. We have the lowest fatality rate on our roads
that's a good
2 years ago than we've had in the history of marking that statistic.
Wow.
So that's a very good thing. We're improving the safety on our highways, but unfortunately, by focusing on local roads and not having money for interstates, they're suffering. And, and we'll get into some of the things later.
Yeah. Well, we're going to run to a break, but I'll tell you, I want to talk about electric vehicles. What's going on with them? Are they going to be taxed? Blah blah blah. We'll get to that in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society, inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine, and by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care.
All right, we're doing an important road and bridge repair subject for this couple of segments, and Bob Latham is sitting across from me. He's the expert that we bring in from time to chat about these things. All right, electric vehicles, there's no doubt that they have a very important environmental component, but they also have tires, they get on the roads, they, wear and tear on the roads, and that's another aspect of it, correct?
Sure. Let's talk about the short and the long-term issue with regard to electric vehicles. We're seeing more and more manufacturers invest in electric vehicles. Volkswagen, actually Mack Truck, and Volvo are on the commercial side. So we're going to see an explosion here in the next 5 years of the use of electric vehicles, particularly on the commercial side. Right now, they pay minimal or no highway user fees whatsoever. Now, I'm talking about a strictly electric vehicle, not necessarily a hybrid, because they do pay some gas tax.
Sure.
So while you and I, who have gasoline-powered vehicles, are paying for the use of the roads and improvement, the people that own electric vehicles currently do not. The House of Representatives is debating this issue right now. They're looking at what are some of the appropriate levels for a fee structure. 23 states in the country have some sort of an electric vehicle highway user fee, and it's important. This is an important stopgap measure as we move. We probably in the next 10 to 20 years we'll move away from a liquid fuels tax system into more of a mileage-based fee system. But this is more of a stopgap, and I kind of get a chuckle right now from the people who are resisting this, saying, "Oh, well, we shouldn't have to pay," and that sort of thing because we're environmentally friendly. Well, until our electrical plants turn over from their current coal and coal byproduct, which they are in the state of Pennsylvania, I would say that electric vehicles probably have a higher carbon footprint right now in Pennsylvania than a gasoline-powered car with a good catalytic converter.
So what's your best estimate about what the legislature does?
Well, I think the legislature is going to enact a reasonable registration fee that will be somewhat commensurate with, maybe not even as much as the estimated amount that the average driver pays in gasoline taxes. And that's not going to generate a tremendous amount of money. It's not going to solve some of the major funding issues that you and I just talked about, but it's a start, and it will have the system in place. So as more and more of these vehicles come online, it will be a significant amount of money.
Yeah, this hasn't gotten a lot of attention, but it seems to me this is an important subject.
Well, right now it's a fairness issue, because we've always had a user-based system to pay for highways, and this is a significant group of users who are not paying their freight.
Right. All right, before I let you go, there's a nonprofit National Transportation Research Organization known as TRIP, T-R-I-P. What is TRIP, and why is what they're doing important?
Okay, so TRIP is an acronym for the Road Information Program. They're a Washington, D.C. based research organization, and what they do is they look at various transportation issues, and most recently they've issued a report on freight shipment. And anybody who lives in central Pennsylvania, for example, and probably elsewhere in the Commonwealth, but particularly along I-81 corridor from Indiantown Gap to the state of Maryland line, and also on Interstate 83, it seems like every day a new 1 million-foot distribution center goes up along those highways. So we are seeing a tremendous explosion of freight movement in a distribution economy, and that is that kind of gets back to the discussion that you and I had earlier on our interstate highways, because we're the Keystone State, and all the freight on trucks, which 80% of this freight that's coming through Pennsylvania is on highways, by the way. We have a good freight rail system.
You travel 81 or you travel the Pennsylvania Turnpike or 80, you know that, don't you?
All you got to do is look at, exactly. So travel those roads in the morning and look at a rest area. It's solidly parked, and also all the way back because of the truck traffic. And it's only going to grow as we have more and more of these distribution centers. So distribution economy is a good thing, and we have to move freight from our ports, our eastern seaports, to other markets. But our interstates are going to suffer, and that's a situation we have to find a way to fund it.
Yeah, and it's likely to increase, even though we have this business with a lot of thing done by e-commerce now. It's still going to continue to be big.
Well, e-commerce is driving it because the stuff still has to drive on trucks.
We're out of time. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.